price is what you pay, but value is what you get. So every time I raise a price, I raise my value. If I were to offer this service to someone and I charge X amount, would they then say and look at it, I would pay 3 times the amount of what she's charging right now? What value do I need to add for my clients? So that way they walked out of the building like, dude, I just got $500 worth of stuff. Welcome to another episode of Badass Clinicians. Today I have a great friend, Stella from Movement Underground. So if you guys have been living under the rock for the past few years and you don't know who he is, I feel sorry for you because he has some really good content. And I met Mike in New York City at a friend's event. Shout out to Shante, the Movement Maestro. We met in person, hit it off, and we kind of stay in touch. And he's one of the person that I always want to get on this podcast because he is an athletic trainer and he's able to build a very scalable business, doing all cash-based out in Long Island. So, hey, Mike, man, welcome to the show.
Natty, thanks for having me on, brother. Appreciate it, man.
Let's just go a little background on you a little bit. Obviously, not many people know who you are. If they know who you are, let's just remind them who you are, why you're so cool.
Like you said, I'm Mike Stella. I own the Movement Underground. It's kind of a culmination of like 20 years in clinical practice as an athletic trainer. So I'm an athletic trainer and a strength coach by trade, but I have my origin story is kind of like a lot of athletic trainers. Is I was an injured athlete. I was a really highly recruited lacrosse player in high school. Had a lot of Division I scholarship offers to play, and then I blew my knee out. So I tore my ACL, PCL, MCL, meniscus. The official diagnosis was is what they called it. Tibial plateau fracture. It was a really, really bad collision knee injury. And so, I was inspired by my high school athletic trainer who really helped me a lot at that time. And Marist College was the last Division I school to offer me any athletic money. They kind of rolled the dice on me because they were in between coaches and I kind of fell into their lap, as an injured player. But they also happen to have an athletic training program, so it kind of worked out that way. And, my original goals for my career were to work in professional athletics. I really wanted to be an ATC with a professional sports team. I guess at that time I was thinking like NFL, NBA, like, the class, the top sports, and took my first job at the University of Florida. So that was really cool. I got to work in the SEC and work with the Gators during a national championship football year. So,
with Hernandez and Tebow and oh man,
and I also worked with the little track and field program, and I got to work with 14 Olympians from 9 different countries. And that was my first year out of school, you know what I mean? So I was like a green athletic trainer, and here I am caring for what would be multi-million-dollar athletes. And, and I always joke or say that experience was really the catalyst for me because it was sports medicine in a bubble. Because, our operating budget for athletics was like $95 million for the year. So like you really didn't have a budget. The resource of money was not an issue. So like the mindset was like, if you could give your athlete a 1% advantage, it doesn't matter what it costs, give them the 1% advantage. And so I think unlike, a traditional, like maybe a PT clinic, like insurance driven clinic where budget, time, all those things are of like really limited ability to give, I got to experience the exact opposite of that. Now, the downside to that type of working experience was I was working 100 hours a week, minimum. So I was opening the athletic training room at 6 a.m. and I was closing it at 11 p.m. 6 days a week. And my day off was, a regular 6 to 8 hour day. I got to do a lot of stuff in a very short amount of time. And then I went and I took a graduate assistant job. The other cool thing about athletic training at that time was you could kind of parlay your undergraduate ATC credential into a master's for free in a lot of cases. So I worked for George Washington University, and I worked for the athletics department as an athletic trainer, and I was able to get a master's degree in sports business administration and exercise science. And so I got to do a lot of cool stuff there. I work with the teams. And then slowly I just got burnt out of athletic training because it was the hours and the pay sucked.
What year was that? Was that like year 2 in or 3?
So I worked at Florida for like a year and a half, and then I took my grad assistantship. So I was there from 2009 through 2011. Again, still working full-time as an ETC at that point, but I was in school as well. And then I left and came back to New York, and I was working at a small Division I in New York City, LIU Brooklyn. I was an assistant athletic trainer there. But I took a full-time job, and here I am with 2 master's degrees, having worked and rehabbed Olympic-level athletes, professional athletes, and I was making like $29,000 a year to work 80 hours a week. So I was bartending on the weekends to kind of fund my career. You know, I would leave work on a Friday at like 5
You're the
p.m.
most qualified bartender I've ever met.
Oh, dude, yeah. You know, but again, I was, you know, I'd go bartend in New York City and I'd make $500 a night. I was making more money 4 nights a month than I was making as a full-time athletic trainer with 2 master's degrees. And so that's the problem with athletic training from like a fundamental career. It's an awesome career because as far as like sports medicine experience goes, and again, I'm not trying to throw shade at any other rehab profession, but what other professional gets to go from on-field assessment where nobody else has seen it? You're the first person to look at it. So on-field assessment, maybe doctor referral, you know, maybe it's a surgical intervention, immediate acute rehab, subacute rehab to long-term rehab, back to strength and conditioning, and then on-field performance again. So like we get to see the entire spectrum of care and be a part of that and be hands-on in that whole process. So as far as like what I'm able to offer my clients now is I know exactly how these injuries happen. I know exactly how to manage them in the short and long term and how to get you back to where you want to be. And I've been able to, forward that into a business, right? The problem with athletic training, just to finish the point, is mostly that it's kind of a race to the bottom. It's a cool job. So like, you know, when Florida says, hey, do you want to come work with our elite athletics program? And you're like, yeah, I want to do that. That's freaking awesome. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're going to pay you $35,000 a year. Because if you say no, somebody else will say yes for the experience, right? So that ends up being the problem with the profession. So I left the collegiate setting because I was just like, I can't do this. I can't survive on this amount of money and live in New York, right? Mm-hmm. And then I worked in a PT clinic. And then the worst part about that was, my salary was a little higher. My hours were regular. And then I got burnt out for like the exact reasons that PTs get burnt out, which is I wasn't able to really help anybody, which is what I really love to do because I was doing like cookie cutter templates and it just killed my soul to like have to just follow protocols for everything.
Another thing is I can't even imagine the way you're probably getting treated by some PT because you're an AT.
Oh, yeah.
Because I've seen it, dude. I've seen where people try to big league AT, PTA, like I don't know, like something about getting a doctorate make you a kind of a dick.
I gotta say, for the most part in that clinic, my colleagues that were PTs, like the staff PTs, treated me with a lot of respect. And because I was really good at what I did, and I was, I'm a smart guy, but it's not like I rolled out of bed and like, I'm a smart guy. It's like I worked my ass off. Like in the wake of that knee injury, like I never achieved my prior level of performance. Like as a collegiate lacrosse player, I was a junk show. I went from being like one of the best players on Long Island in high school with like endless options for college to like couldn't catch and throw because I was so worried about hurting myself again. And I just was so worried about the knee. And so I just became obsessed with movement and mobility and training and rehab and like really for my own insecure issues. Like I was doing it mostly for me at that time. And that was kind of like what inspired a lot of my early continuing education. The staff PTs treated me really well. The owners of the clinic treated me like the hell, and the worst part was like, they'd be like, hey, Mike, we're hired this new PT. They're right out of school. We need you to teach them, manual therapy and all of the stuff that they need to know, but we're going to pay them double what we're paying you and you're going to oversee them. It's like, what is that? That's like horrible, So it just killed my soul for other reasons. And then I was just, and that is funny because you made that post the other day, like how many people started a business because they saw somebody else doing it and they knew they could do it better. And that was 100% the case for me. Like I looked at this guy who was a very well-known PT, like back in the day, like in the 80s and 90s. And he was a good dude in many ways, but I'm like, pretty much 50 to 75% of the things he says to patients is absolute BS. Like not true. No evidence to support that. And, he was all about his ego and him being the best. And so I was just like, I could definitely do this better.
There's 2 reasons why people start their own practice, right? Going down this path. It's like the first one is they burned out. They got abused by the system. They feel underappreciated. They can't give the best care that they want to the patient. Or the second one, they saw someone doing it and they're like, you know what? I can find a way better way of doing it, right? So both are necessity in some way, right? The first choice is about maximizing your own life in some way. Like because I'm burning out, I'm losing my life potential and I need to maximize it and get my time back. The second one is innovation is I've seen someone do it. There's a better way of doing it. So I need to do it. Both are necessary for change, right? You need to be able to maximize, you need to be able to innovate. So that's why I just kind of threw that on there, and I'm happy. Like a lot of people DM me, it's like, yeah, I'm number one, I'm number two, I'm both, right? It's always those two things. So I just love that I can put it in a binary context.
You nailed it, man, because it is 100%. And like maybe for a lot of people, it's like the shades of gray. It's a little bit of both, and that kind of, maybe it's like always those negative moments, I think, in your career or life that, maybe inspire the most change, and so like, sometimes you just got to feel that hurt so bad in order to take the leap. Because really at that point I said, I had gotten my master's in business, one of my master's in business, for that reason, because I wasn't confident that I could make a living as an athletic trainer at that time. And so I was like, at that time, I was like, you know what? I'll jump 2 feet in and try to do something that no other athletic trainer has done before. And I'll try to be the first guy through the fence. And if I fail, I'll just go get a regular job in an office somewhere and, work 9 to 5 and just do that. I wanted to work in sports medicine or athletic training in some capacity, but I just wasn't willing to sacrifice myself anymore to do it.
And that was my mindset too, man. Like worst come to worst, I can always go back and get a job. That's the whole thing about working in healthcare, right? So let's talk about the hurt. How bad was it for you to be like, you know what, this is it, I'm done, I'm going to go do it? And I also want you to expand, like, what did you learn with your business master degree? So I assume you have your MBA or something similar. And how much did that help you in a real world context?
Yeah, so it's an MBA, but it was in the tourism department at George Washington. So tourism kind of focused on sports management, hotel, hospitality, event planning, like that kind of thing. So the concentration is a little bit more on how to run like big events, how to run like professional teams from like a managerial perspective. So I did a lot of like sponsorship work, a lot of marketing work, a lot of business finance, a lot of that kind of stuff. And I can't say that it didn't help me, because I think one of the biggest issues for a lot of us as clinicians is like we come out with a clinical background and we have no business acumen whatsoever. Mm-hmm. And so that really becomes the bottleneck issue when you're trying to do something a little different, because you have to have that. So at least it exposed me enough to like management and business that I kind of knew where to look for some of the resources and what I basically needed to do. But as far as like running a day-to-day and being a leader and what modern business is, no, I like hardly at all. It's just another piece of paper, honestly. Kind of in the same way, like, how much have you learned, how much of your clinical practice is what you learned in school versus what you learned after?
Sure. Yep.
You know what I mean? It's probably like what, like maybe 80-20. It's what you learned after is what you apply every day. Mm-hmm. And what you learned in school is like just the foundation. It's very much the same thing for the business side for me.
Yeah, man. For me, like I saw my parents open their own restaurant. I helped them open the restaurant. I saw like the struggle that they go through. So I was like, oh, I don't need to get an MBA for this. I've seen what a bad business look like by running a family restaurant. So I just have to kind of do the opposite. And the biggest thing for me was my parents did not want to hire anyone. They always have that mindset of like, no one's going to do a better job than me, which is true. It's your business. No one's going to work as hard as you. They're not going to care about your food. They're not going to care about your product as much as you do. But what ended up happening is that they just got so burned out that they end up just selling the restaurant. But for me, it's like, well, if I don't hire someone, that's where I'm going to end up. And I'm going to be working literally every single day. So let's talk about some of your limitations in the beginning, like, and different hurdle that you have to overcome by stages, right? So let's say year 1, year 2, right? It's just most likely just you starting your own practice. And what was the biggest hurdle that you had to overcome in order for you to get to like, all right, I actually need some help?
I mean, honestly, for me in the beginning, it was just like, is this even legal or not? Because, it's crazy because athletic training education, like school, they basically try to indoctrinate you into this belief that the only option is working for a team, working underneath the supervision of a physician. So that's like one of the things about athletic training that's really interesting is, you're technically working under the license of a physician, right? Much like a nurse or a PA or, like people who work in a hospital who have standing orders with a physician to carry out certain tasks. So athletic training falls under that umbrella, but the major difference is no athletic trainer ever works with your physician, even in the building, right? So it's like, yeah, you're an extension of that and you're meant to, and basically the whole profession is kind of, organized around this idea. It's basically a referral funnel for doctors, right? So like I work at a college and I'm funneling all of these collegiate athletes to one physician practice, essentially. And so my biggest issue in the beginning was just figuring out if I could do a cash practice. Could I do insurance? Could I do this on my own, A, without a physician, or even B, if I could find a physician that would write me standing orders, what would that look like? And so I called the NATA, which is the National Athletic Training Association. I called my state licensing board. I called anybody that would answer the phone. And every single person gave me a different answer. Every single person. And what I took from that was nobody knows. Like one woman at the licensing board says, well, you can't do that because you can't hire your boss. And I'm like, where is it written anywhere that your physician is your boss? Like, that's not the same relationship. It's a relationship. It's not determining like a hierarchical, like, you know what I mean? So it was just very difficult in the beginning to get over that initial like hesitation of like, am I going to my life if I do this,
Yeah.
And so what I did was I read my practice act front to back like 5 times. I interpret it to the best of my ability, and I put the pieces in place that I thought, the lens that I looked through was, if I ever had to stand in front of a judge and defend myself as far as like litigation or liability, could I prove to them that I did my due diligence and I am qualified to do what I do? And I was comfortable with that answer of it being yes. And so that's what I did. I started also with the help of a former classmate who was a strength coach, but we went to the same athletic training program. He went more on the strength and conditioning side. He wanted to open a sports performance business, but he wanted to have a sports medicine component. And so I had already at that time, so this is like in the early 2000 teens, was looking at this idea of like putting a little recovery clinic inside of CrossFit gyms, kind of like that. That was like before anybody was really doing that kind of model really. And kind of at like the dawn of like modern social media. And so we partnered up and started a place on Long Island with kind of like a handshake agreement. And I made some mistakes there too. We'll say that. So a lot of what I learned early on was just jumping in and not being afraid to fail and just failing and being okay with it and just continuing to move forward.
I mean, that's the whole point, that you have to fail for you to learn something. If things were all good, there's no way you're going to learn any lesson. Like I had a high school student that came in and a girl just dumped him. I was like, bro, did you cry? He's like, yeah, I think I cried a little bit. I was like, it's a rite of passage, man. You have to cry over a girl before you can find a one, and then you move forward, right? And I think that's literally everything in life. Like listen, you and I can probably talk about like bad decisions that we have made, especially like partnering up with the wrong people, hiring the wrong people, how much it costs. It cost me way more when I hired someone wrong, and continue. Like the other day, someone that we let go, I got unemployment. I'm like, look, I'm still paying for it. I was like, not only if that person cost me money and lost me business, which comes out of my pocket, now the unemployment also come out of my pocket. Let's just go back. As far as the legality go, would you then recommend someone who is an ATC, who's looking to start their own, practice in some way, to consult with like a lawyer to make sure that they're operating like to protect themselves? Because that's how I operate too. Like I always say, like, if I were to get audits, what do I need to do to make sure I don't go to jail?
Luckily for me at that time, I was working at that PT clinic, and what had started happening, the cool thing about that particular clinic was I worked as basically an aide, and they allowed me to do like personal training on the side. So like, and use the facility, right? So it was like a gym facility. And what had happened was I worked with a lot of patients and they really liked working with me, and then they hired me as their trainer. And that's kind of when I started blending some of my manual stuff in. And one of my really great clients at that time was a lawyer. And then what had happened was, the clinic kept raising my rates, like because I was doing so well, and they didn't like that. So I started seeing him at his building in the city. And I started really talking with him a lot about what I wanted to do. And like, he looked at the practice act and he looked at what I was trying to do. And his advice to me was like, well, Mike, listen, at the end of the day, when it comes to legal, it's all about wording. It's all about language and how you set this up. He's like, because as far as I can tell, if you're not taking insurance and you're not a quote unquote medical business, if you're a wellness business, it's not under the jurisdiction of medical. You're a consultant at that point. And I'm like, oh, that's an interesting way to look at it. And that's exactly what I did, is I set myself up as a consultant, essentially, you know, and I do health and wellness services, and I don't misrepresent myself. My clients, I say, I'm an athletic trainer. This is what an athletic trainer is and what they do. This is how I can help you. And I also stay in my lane. I think that's a huge piece of this, is like, where are you going to get in trouble is like, you're going to go outside your lane. Now in New York, it's a very draconian practice act. So I can't do cool stuff like needling. I can't do manipulations. There are some states where athletic trainers can do that. So I just don't do that. I keep it very, very simple. I don't misrepresent myself. But luckily for me, I had that friendship or that relationship with somebody that I was helping, and then they were willing to help me. And I think that was a huge piece of it early on, was I didn't have to pay for that. It was just kind of like in the process of me doing sessions with him, and he was able to kind of help me get set up.
No, I had similar things, man. Like, I mean, the people that had helped me start my practice, I wouldn't be here talking to you right now if I didn't have those help. Like, and I have to acknowledge them like all the time. Like, you know, I had a guy who I was doing some programming for. He was trying to do powerlifting. He's a lawyer. He helped me tremendously, like navigating some stuff. He actually helped me get the trademark on myokinetics, right? So it's one of those things where you just leverage the network. And then I also got advice earlier, like, hey, if you don't know something, go to a lawyer, pay for it, and you pay for it one time, and that now you can sleep at night.
Right.
So like that's what I did. I was like, let me just go do this thing the right way.
Well, to your point, man, I think like one of the cool things is like, if you really look at, and like LinkedIn's a good example of this, if you look at the people that you know in your immediate circle, and then the people that they know, you're connected to almost 1 billion people. Like if you know 1,000 people personally, or you're friends on Facebook with 1,000 people, and every single one of those 1,000 people knows 1,000 people, that's 1 million people. Here's a good story about like a hire gone wrong. And it wasn't really a hire gone wrong. It was a hire that I learned a lot. This PT student came to me, is like, Mike, I really love your content. I love the way you practice and treat. I want to intern for you. And he was like a local PT student. I'm like, freaking hell yeah, man. That's awesome. Like a hungry young clinician. Let's go. And I became really friendly with this guy because he's a really good dude. And he had some rough stuff in his life that I could resonate with, because I had a rough upbringing as well. And, you know, I really wanted to help this kid, and I wanted to put him on a path to success. And like, you know, so he graduates, he takes a clinic job because he wanted to make more money. And at that time in my business, I really couldn't afford to pay him, you know, a PT salary straight out of the gate, because he, you know, he was so green and he had so much to learn. But he interned for me still a few days a week. And then we decided, okay, you're going to work for me like as a per diem kind of deal. And at that point too, I set up like a mini second clinic in our town, like at a CrossFit gym. And I was like, basically like grooming this kid to basically have his own clinic. That's my goal. And, you know, I'm giving him clients, I'm kind of showing him the ropes. And finally he comes to me, he's like, hey, Mike, I you know what? I don't want to do this anymore, because I don't want to work with nobodies. I want to work with professional athletes like you do. And I'm like, whoa. Time out for a sec. Now, time out for a sec. Like, first of all, what do you mean by nobodies? Second of all, I've been doing this since 2004, right? You can't compare my year 18 to your year 1. That's not fair to you, and that's not fair to me. I'm like, I've been doing this a freaking long time, and I've been working with athletes for a long time, and it takes a long time. I told him, I was like, listen, if LeBron James called you right now and said, I want you to be my personal guy for X amount of dollars per year, be honest with me, would you be ready for that? And he said, no. I was like, so what do you mean by working with nobodies? I was like, I'm where I'm at, not because of the pro athletes. Pro athletes come and go. They're fickle. They come and go in the wind, man. The people that make my business operate and drive my revenue and drive my referrals and drive new business for me are the local connections of weekend warriors and people who own their own businesses and people who are lawyers and doctors, and the regular non-athletic clients are the people that really operate and drive a business, not the athletes. The athletes are fun to work with, but they're not profitable in any way. He just kind of got in love with that pro athlete dream. Like one athlete was going to pick him up and give him this gaudy 6-figure salary and travel the world with them. And I'm like, dude, I mean, like, I know that does exist out there, but that's so rare. And like, what, you want to be one person's bitch for on call 24/7? Like, you don't want that.
People just want to be, they want to be in that entourage, man.
Yeah, they want the entourage, right? Yeah, exactly. That's such a good way to put it. They want the fast lifestyle. and to have somebody that they can, not mooch off of, but like somebody that can help give them that fast lifestyle instantly. And so we parted ways amicably, and he's doing great now. He moved out to Cali, I think, and he's a great dude, and I love him to death. And I really hope that I was able to teach him something. It's just hard, when you're young. Like I was the same way, man. Like my first goal was work with pro athletes. That's what I wanted. And then the deeper you get into like athletics, like even physical therapists all the time, I want to work in pro sports. I'm like, do you though? Mm-hmm. Like, do you know that like you basically get treated awful? Yeah, it's a cool job, and you get to say I'm a PT for the Knicks or whatever, but like it is a really difficult job. And at the end of the day, the surgeons make all the calls anyway. And it's this deeply political hierarchy that is no fun unless you're the surgeon,
So I think we can dive more into this. And I know I speak to a lot of clinic owners who ask me like, oh man, you see a lot of pro guys, like how do you go about that and this and that? And I make sure that they know like, hey, I attract the regular people who wants to pay, so that way they can live a certain lifestyle, so they can have no limitation. Like the pro just happened based on the word of mouth referral, the amount of people that I know, but I don't make a business out of that. You cannot make a business out of that. Otherwise, you'll be starving. And I think what clinic owners, whoever it is that you are listening to this, you need to stop identifying your identity with the patient that you work with. And that cannot exist, because you need to be your own person. And just to paraphrase, like our good friends, right? Jamie Moore is like, a body is a body. A joint is a joint. You got to learn to treat as many joints as possible, as many bodies as possible. If you learn how to do that, then an athlete is just another human being. The best thing about, and I think you and I can agree on this, the best part about working with pro athletes when they work with us is that we treat them like regular people.
100%. I charge them the same. I talk with them in the same way I talk to anybody else. I hold them to the same standards. I've lost pro athletes because I was honest with them, because I told them the truth. And I'm like, I'd rather tell you the truth and maintain my integrity than blow smoke up your ass and be a yes man like everybody else in your life. You know what I mean? And so, to your point too, like one of the things that drives me nuts about athletic training too as a profession is like when I go to like NATA conference, and like every single athletic trainer is walking around with like their team logo jersey on, especially if they work at a big school. Like if they work at Michigan State, they will not walk anywhere. They won't go to a bar. They won't go to a restaurant. They won't go anywhere at that conference without a Michigan State thing on, because they wear it like it's a billboard, and that's their identity. They're equating their value as an athletic trainer and their ability as an athletic trainer with just the school that they work for. And like, let me be honest, like I know a ton of really terrible athletic trainers that work in professional sports just because they know the right people and they've been there forever. Doesn't make them more competent at their job. It just, if that was the case, then why do any pro athletes hire outside consultants and work with outside people? If the best people were in pro sports, then why are they all going to other people like you and me?
Yeah,
I'll wait.
Exactly.
They do it because they want something better, and it is out there. You know what I mean? So if you're an athletic trainer and you're listening to this, take off your freaking polo and just understand that who you are as a clinician is not directly correlated with who are you without that logo? Do you bring value without that logo? And if the answer is no, then like figure that out. And that is the fast track to a better career. I can promise you that.
I love that, man. I think it's a journey of any personal growth. Really, you always gotta look inward to see who you want to become. I think in business, I learned that more and more, especially like what my company represent. It represent a part of who I am. So I have to get clear on who I am first before I can get clear on the message I want my company to represent. And I want my core value, my personal core value have to align with my business core value. And therefore my team can understand like, what is it we're doing, what we're doing it for, right?
Hell yeah, man. That's great. I love it.
Let's get a little more superficial. Like, so when you first started, and I know a lot of people listening to this is they're already starting it. They have their own practice, so and so. Like, what was your price point? Let's go there. Because when I first started, I charged $60.
Yeah. It's really funny because, like, again, it all starts in that clinic, and I was doing like personal training, right? So what did I do? I went to the other trainers, because most of the trainers, right? They were strength coach backgrounds, exercise physiology backgrounds, a couple other ATCs. Like we were like the aides for PT, but we were the ones that really like all kind of trained people on the side at that gym. And so I started with like asking, hey, what do you guys charge? And everybody's like, well, I charge like $100 a session. And, you know, you got to pay 20 to the house. So I'll make it $80 a session. I'm like, okay, that's not bad. So I charge $100 a session. And then kind of what happened was I got so busy that the clinic kept asking me for more and more of a cut. And then they wanted 50%. And I was like, get the hell out of here. I'm done with that.
Yeah.
So I started doing like the whole taking my table to people's, you know, every high rise building in New York City has like a nice gym in it. So it's like, oh, I'll just go to this person's building and I'll treat them and train them in their building privately. And it's going to, you know, now my hour session really takes 2 hours because I got to commute. So I raised my price to like 120. And again, it was all arbitrary. I had no idea. But at that time, you know, I was making like 50 grand a year at the clinic and I was making maybe another 30 or 40 on personal training. So I was like almost doubling my salary just doing like the hustle, but I was also working like 15 hours a day, you know? So when I made the jump and came out to Long Island, I really didn't know. And it was something around, you know, 50 or $60 a session, you know, because I really didn't know how to price my service. But like when I was in the city, what I started to do was I'd be like, hey, listen, you know, it takes me a long time to get here. And I would raise the price. And every single one of those clients were like, okay. Like they didn't even bat an eye. Oh, okay. So then like towards the end of my time in the city, I started just raising it just to see what people would say, if they would even object to it. And they never did. So that's when I set up the clinic and I was like, okay, I can reduce my price point a little bit for like a half-hour session because people are coming to me. So I could take away all that commuting and traveling work. So I was doing like the $60 for or 50 or $60 for a half-hour session, which was going to give me that, you know, 100, 120 an hour. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was something like that. And I was selling packages, you know, like 4 sessions, 8 sessions, 10 sessions, like that kind of thing. You know, it's definitely tricky, like figuring out pricing. But like one of the things I always kind of looked at was like triple net, like the idea of triple net, like you would sign a rent agreement is like, you got to pay your bills, you got to pay yourself. And then the business itself has to make some money. You have to have something in the bank for a rainy day, for a bad month, for new supplies, for new assets. So I always kind of kept that in mind, like as I do pricing, you know, and now I'm like north of 200 an hour, you know, and I want to be as inclusive as possible. So a lot of that pricing is based on, right now I'm still subleasing so I can keep my overhead pretty low and just continue to deliver a high quality, you know, as high a quality of service for that price point as possible. But like I said, man, every time I've raised the price, I've never really had an issue, you know, and you got to just do it confidently, I think. But yeah, I started treating like $50-$60 like a session.
Yeah. No, we all start somewhere like that, man. And the one thing that always stay in my head is price is what you pay, but value is what you get. So every time I raise the price, I raise my value. If anything, I raise my value first before I raise the price. So I always think that if I were to offer this service to someone and I charge X amount, would they then say and look at it, I would pay 3 times the amount of what she's charging right now. And that's my framework for it, right? Like what value do I need to add for my clients, so that way they walked out of the building like, dude, I just got $500 worth of stuff.
Dude, that's such a great point. I actually had a client say this to me like 2 weeks ago. You know, he's a jiu-jitsu athlete, like, you know, works in finance, super smart guy. Again, another example of like, I've gotten finance tips and like investing tips, and like he's helped me think about investing in different ways. Not to say he's giving me like stock picks or whatever, like nothing like that, but like, hey man, have you considered this? You know, like you learn from your clients. So if you listen, if you actually like have a conversation, you can learn a lot. But he was trying to refer his jiu-jitsu instructor, who's a black belt and like is the main teacher at his school, who's like been dealing with shoulder issues for years. And this guy, you know, he's a jiu-jitsu instructor. He's not a millionaire by any means, but he looked at my eval price at $200 and he's like, oh man, it's $200. Like, I can't believe this. And so the original client that I'm talking about was scheduled for surgery. And after 2 weeks of working with him, he canceled the surgery because he was pain-free again. Like, you know, shoulders, as I work with a lot of throwing athletes, so shoulders is kind of like one of my jams, right? And he ended up referring this guy in. The guy actually came in, he paid the eval fee. And what he told me after the fact was, he was like, this is how he put it. He's like, you're looking at the $200 like that's expensive, but what would you pay to have this shoulder problem solved for you right now? What amount of money, if you had a magic wand, would you pay to have this problem be gone? And the dude's like, I would pay anything to have this done. And he's like, so then go pay the $200 and go get it fixed. And I'm like, oh, I'm using that, man. That's so good. Cause it's true. Like you're not selling a service. We're trying to sell a solution to a problem. I think that's the biggest hurdle for a lot of us as clinicians to get past this idea. Like I put this up a while ago, but like the whole idea of like, you're giving people a menu of options. Like, okay, a deep tissue is this amount, a sports massage this amount, instrument assisted, cupping, like they all have different price points. And you're trying to, stratify your menu based on the services you're providing. I'm like, this isn't freaking Chipotle. You're the clinician,
Not an a la carte thing.
Right. You're supposed to choose the fixins, not the client in this case. You know what I'm saying? So it's not burger and fries. I charge people for the time they spend with me and for them to have access to my ability to think and problem solve for them based on their issue. And whatever techniques I'm doing are simply the techniques that I think are going to give them the biggest ROI on their time, which is return on investment, right? I talk about ROI. When I do a sale, I really sit down and just I do my assessment, I do a little treatment, sit them down in the office, and I'm saying, here's my 3 options for how I start with new clients. Here's my recommendation for you based on XYZ factor. And I'm teaching them about their body. I'm trying to teach them and educate them. That's the goal. So that they leave here more educated, whether they buy from me in that instance or not. And that mindset's really helps me convert a lot more people. It's like, these are solutions-based options, not service-based options. Here's the solution that you want. Here's the services that I think you need, the amount of sessions, the timeline on your prognosis. And I think just taking that step back and thinking of it in that light can really help you get over that fear of asking for what you're worth.
Yeah, and I think when it comes to pricing and sales conversation, people are uncomfortable because they don't want to have the conversation. It's not that the other person is uncomfortable of having it, right? So I wrote a post a couple months ago. It's like, don't blame the fact that you hate having sales conversation. Blame the fact that you are not comfortable talking about your ability to solve that person's problem. And you're uncomfortable of taking on that ownership of helping them get to the solution they want. If you're really good at what you do and you know you can get them the outcome that they want, you are ethically responsible to say, hey, I can help you and here's how much it's going to cost and here's how I can help you get there. That's a sales conversation.
Right.
That's all it is. It doesn't get harder than that. People just overthink everything. Again, we're in a field where people overthink, right? It's totally normal. The one story that was told to me and always stuck with me was there's a plumber that came into a house. The sink is clogged, right? Water's coming out everywhere. And like the wife's freaking out. The husband just like, okay, I'm calling the plumber. The plumber came in and he was like, all right, it's going to cost $500 to fix this. The guy was like, okay, cool, do it. He went and grabbed a hammer, walked back out, look at the drain a little bit, take the hammer, hit the drain 3 times. Next thing you know, the water started going away. And he's saying, that's $500. And then the husband goes, you just used the hammer to just hit that. Why am I paying you $500 for that? And the guys go, oh, I'm sorry, I should specify. The hitting the hammer 3 times was $50. Knowing where to hit it is $450. Right. And that's what you're paying for.
Right.
And to me, it's like, that's it. That's exactly what it is. It's not about the tools. It's about the knowledge you accumulate over time to get them the solution that they want. And that's what they're paying for.
Exactly. That's 100% it. And you see those like reels and TikToks all the time of people like, listen, if you want it cheaper, like I've literally said that to clients. It's like, oh, well, I know somebody who does body work cheaper than that. I'm like, so then go there.
Yeah. No, we have 15 clinics in a 5-mile radius. I send people over there.
If you're looking for value, go get value. I'm offering you quality. You know what I'm saying? It's not the same thing.
Well, I wouldn't say value. They're looking for a discount, right? They're looking for something that kind of fit. Because if you're looking for value and you value outcome, then you would pay for that.
Right.
Yeah, so that would be my thing. So let's fast forward a little bit. I know we have a little bit of time left. So let's talk about where you are now, man. How much have you scaled your practice? Obviously, you've been at it for a while and you're a seasoned veteran at this point.
We've had a huge amount of growth, even despite COVID, which definitely kind of put so like, again, I started treating privately in 2014, very humble beginnings. And then that partnership ended in 2018. And that's kind of when I really branched out completely on my own. And since 2018, I've grown by 50% every year, even despite COVID. And a lot of that is systems. A lot of that is people and like having the right people here. Could I have done better? Sure. I think so. There's always room for improvement, but I'm really proud of where we are. And like, I come from a background where, I was raised by a single parent, lost her house. My mom lost her house in 2008 and the market collapsed because she overspent in her reach, got some bad advice, those kinds of things. And so I never really thought I'd be able to buy a house or None of those things. I was like an athletic trainer. I'm like, dude, I have all this college debt. I have all this. I'm like, so I bought a house this year or in 2022 and, really am scaling up the business and looking, potentially, hopefully for some new space, in the next 12 months period of time. So lots of cool things. I think, anything's possible, without going into specific numbers, but, multi 6 figures a year, plenty of meat on the bone in terms of profitability and ability to bring in new people and invest in myself and invest in the business. It just takes time, man. It's a process. Just like training your own body, it's a process. You can't go to work out once and expect to gain muscle. It's business is the same way. It's the daily tasks every single day, with no thought of immediate gratification. And those are the things that tend to lead to the most growth, right? So I learned a lot, made a lot of mistakes, but I also made a lot of really great relationships with people, and I've helped a lot of people. And I think if you just have that mindset, like help as many people as you can. I even have it on my website, like I have a personal brand site, and it's like, and when I wrote it, I just kind of wrote it. I'm a decent writer, but I always kind of go back to it, and it still makes me emotional to even read it back to myself. And it's like, bam, that's the right mission. But it's like, basically it goes something like this is like, I became one of those people whose, my knee was torn up, my athletic future was in serious doubt. And so I changed paths. I went on a mission to become the best sports medicine practitioner I could be and to heal as many people with my head, my hands, and my heart as I could. And that's my mission. And now it's kind of evolved into teaching other clinicians how to do that and how to be that. And that's the success behind the Movement Underground, is putting people in a chance to succeed, putting them in a position to succeed as a clinician with no boundary. So I have 2 athletic trainers that work here. I have a massage therapist /OT that works here. I'm really trying to bring in a PT. So if any of you guys are in New York, Long Island, you're looking for some work and you want to be part of the team, hit me up and I'd be happy to have that conversation with you. But my goal is to have it be multidisciplinary with no more BS between the professions. I don't care. I'm not looking at your credential. Do you have a license? Yes or no? Great. Are you competent? And do you want to learn? And are you a growth-minded person? If that's the case, then you have a home here, and I'm not going to look at you at your credential like I was viewed for very many years. It's like, you're just as good as your credential. It's like, that's crap. That's all imaginary boundaries that we set up because the people in charge of our professions are insecure. Get results for people. People, I can maybe count on one hand how many times people have asked me, what my license is over the years in like almost 10 years of doing this, Yeah. It's ridiculous.
I love that, man. I love seeing that. Like, you're a very mission-driven guy, and I love that. And like, even like when we talk about it before the podcast record, like my mission now is just like, get people like us more together, taking back the healthcare field from like big corporation. Because really, like, we can talk really, really long about how our field is being ruined by that. And the one thing I really picked up, and just based on talking to you, like other mentor that I have, other people I know who have multiple 7, 8 figures business, and the one thing they have in common is that they pick something that they can do literally for the rest of their life. It's an infinite game for them. Just like working out is infinite game for me. Like, I'm always going to be a student of movement. I'm a student of knowledge. Like, I'm always looking to deepen my relationship with people. I'm always here to serve people as much as I can. And I wholeheartedly believe that the reason for us as business owner, as clinic owners, that we get an opportunity to scale our business is to serve as many people as possible, including ourselves, our family, and our employees. So the fact that you're echoing that, man, I really appreciate it, just because, it's why we're on the same wavelength. And I think a lot of people need to know that, because if you're here for the money, it's a short game and it's not going to solve your problem, and you're going to get burned out extremely quickly. And, business is pretty much like death by 1,000 cut if you're not really aware and you're not have the ability to endorse the mistake that you're going to make, and you don't have grace to forgive yourself for that, because then otherwise, how are you going to get up every single day and make the same mistake or make another mistake to learn from it, right? So, I mean, listen, dude, I absolutely appreciate your time. The wisdom you dropped for us within this past hour was great. Obviously, you're a plug-in your job ad, but where can people find you, man?
I'm pretty easy to find. I'm a little bit everywhere. You can check us out at The Movement Underground on YouTube. Obviously, The Movement Underground on Instagram, but also my personal account, which is also a pretty heavy clinical account, like education stuff, is MikeStella_ATC. That's the handle for Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. You can email me, MikeStellaMovement@gmail.com. You can go to the movementunderground.com or MikeStellaMovement.com, 2 websites. So I kind of have like a personal brand website and like the clinic website, you know, because you got to separate them a little bit. But, you know, I think I saw one thing is like every quality brand needs the company brand and needs the person behind it, right? And so kind of, you know, like what is Apple without Steve Jobs, right? What's Amazon without Jeff Bezos, right? So it's a personal brand and a business brand. So that's one piece of advice is like cultivate yourself, share that journey. One of the things I will say too is like I'm grateful for those megacorps that mess this up and like mess us up, because without that we wouldn't have learned that we have the chops to do it better. And without them, other clinicians don't take their lumps and learn that they are more resilient than they think they are. And then how many clients that we have that pay us cash now are products of just being absolutely pissed off about the terrible service they got from those megacorps, man. So we need them. Keep growing, megacorp. You know what I mean? Like do your thing, because as you keep growing and you make more profit for your stakeholders, you're watering down the service to the end user and your comeuppance are coming at the end of the day. So, you know, it's always one of those things, but I'll leave it on a quote. And I love this, and it's hanging in my bathroom at the Movement Underground, which is, bravery is the audacity to be unhindered by failure and walk in the path of the things unknown.
Damn.
That's what bravery is, right? Yeah, man, it's deep, powerful stuff, but it's the truth. You have to, you know, I never wanted to be an athletic training influencer, like where other ATs look at me and it's probably the thing I'm most proud of in my career. I started this business for me. And what I did was I showed other athletic trainers that this is possible. And I had to be the first guy through the fence. And the first guy through the fence always gets the bloodiest. And that's fine. If I have to be that guy and look behind me and I get to see this, you know, army of ATCs that are now starting their own businesses and branching out. And I believe, and my kind of mantra for 2023 is be the rising tide that raises all the ships. So I'm trying to grow myself, and I'm trying to bring as many people along for that as I can, because I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for all the scars. I'm grateful for all the bullshit. I'm grateful for all the failures and all of the people who told me I couldn't.
I love it, man. That's it. Beat a man in the arena.
Hell yeah.
Theodore Roosevelt. That's my favorite.
That's it.
My favorite passage. Mike, dude, thank you so much, man. I appreciate you.